The death toll in Gaza continues to mount as hundreds of thousands flee south following an Israeli evacuation order. Plus, tensions are rising between the Israeli military and Hezbollah in the north. Is there a risk of another front opening up? I'll break it all down here on Straight Talk. Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Aisha Subarkash. Israel's bombardment of Gaza from the air, sea and land has entered its second week with no end in sight. UN aid agencies say that since the conflict began, nearly 3,000 Palestinians have been killed, over 10,000 injured and 1 million displaced. Health facilities in Gaza are on the brink of collapse as an evacuation order by Israel adds chaos to millions who have been cut off from food, water and electricity. World leaders are calling on Egypt and Israel to allow in much-needed humanitarian aid. Egypt put the blame on Israel, saying airstrikes on the Gazan side of the border had left the Rafah crossing inoperable. Egyptian President Abdel Fatah El-Sisi also blasted Israel, saying its actions had exceeded its right to self-defense. On October 7, Hamas made a large incursion into southern Israel, killing more than 1,300 people and taking nearly 200 hostages. Israel followed with more than a week of heavy bombing across Gaza, where more than a quarter of those killed have been children. Meanwhile, tensions on Israel's northern border have heightened in recent days, raising fears a second front could open against Hezbollah, an Iranian-backed group which operates out of southern Lebanon. And for more on the international effort to end the attack on Gaza, joining me now from Amman is Zaid Eadat. He is the director of the Center for Strategic Studies at the University of Jordan. From Rome, Valeria Gionatta. She is the scientific director of Observatory on Türkiye at the Center for International Political Studies. And from Ankara, Şuay Nilhan Açıkalın. She is an associate professor at Hacı Bayram Veli University. A warm welcome to you all, and thanks for joining me on Straight Talk. So, Zaid, what's your take on the current situation in Gaza, and what is the world witnessing right now?
Well, the world is witnessing one of the worst humanitarian catastrophe for the last, I don't know, maybe more than a century or more than that. It's one of the worst crises, one of the most devastating situations Palestinians have faced. This is not, all what has happened since 1948 till now is not compared to what we're witnessing in Gaza today. So, and I'm also here by referring to the situation and how the situation is, trying to describe the humanitarian crisis, how deep that is, how bad that is. Separating that from the strategic political analysis. So I'm looking at the killing of the civilians, at the Israelis' attack on the civilians in Gaza, destroying more than 70,000 houses for now, forcing more than 1 million people to leave their home, forced immigration within Gaza for now, and planning to do some transfer outside of Gaza. The lack of food, the lack of electricity, the lack of water, drinkable water, all actually stands up as a war crime according to the international law. So what we're seeing is a violation of all international laws, and civilians are suffering, and the humanitarian crisis is getting deeper and deeper. And if there is no enough successful, fruitful international diplomatic efforts to contain that, then the world will face the worst humanitarian crisis ever.
So, Valeria, how has the international community responded to Israel's disproportionate use of force, which mainly targeted civilians in Gaza?
Well, I do believe that any response from the international community wasn't either efficient and constructive. We have witnessed that the resolution that was proposed by Russia and Brazil to the Security Council within UN has been rejected. And again, this is underlining the extreme need and urgency to reform the UN Security Council, because there is a sort of ideological and also a polarization within the Council between the West and the rest, as well as in the West, we have been witnessing a strong support towards Israel rather than Palestinian people and the people in Gaza as well. I can see from European Union perspective, since the very beginning of the crisis back in the 7th of October, the main European offices, they just stood up, standing close to Israel by showing the Israeli flag. And there is also a sort of fatigue in making a distinction between Palestine and Hamas.
Yes.
So the situation is highly concerned, and there is a huge polarization, and I think there is also an extreme risk of radicalization. Moreover, there is this huge divide between, again, I would say, the West or the rest, or the North and the South of the international system. I mean, it has been worth noticing the Colombian and some South American African countries that they just declare what's happening in the Gaza Strip as a genocide, and which is remarkable, I do believe. But again, there is no union. I mean, a univocal effort in just stopping the crisis and any human crisis.
Yes. So we see a rather muted reaction from the European Union to the civilian casualties. Shuaib, the UN has warned that evacuating over 1 million people in such a short period of time would lead to disaster. There are reports that dozens of people were killed after an airstrike hit a convoy that was fleeing the Gaza's north. So are the UN's warnings coming sadly true, and will we see more of these strikes in the days to come?
Thank you. Actually, we faced a multidimensional humanitarian crisis, and one of these, the dimension is definitely the forced migration of those people towards the Egypt. And unfortunately, as you said, that the UN already has been warned Israel and other regional actors that there will be a much more worse times that we now saw it, because first of all, those people are the forced migrants, and the second one, those people, including the migrants one and also other the locals of Gaza, basically faced without any water, electricity. So through the days, even through the hours, we saw much more worse scenario than the UN and the EU, all other international actors are expected. But unfortunately, and more paradoxically, the General Secretary of UN made this statement and warning on the 3rd day of the conflict. And right now we are in the 11th day. And since then, no one really taking care of those people. And unfortunately, the situation going more worse.
So Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has been vocal in his call to address the humanitarian situation. Let's hear what he said recently, then we'll continue to talk.
The blockade has worsened the humanitarian situation in Gaza and made the region more vulnerable. I'm addressing the entire world through you. Cutting off the electricity, water, fuel, and food of 2 million people crammed into 360 square kilometers is a fundamental violation of human rights.
So, Zaid, world leaders are scrambling to find a way to stop the violence. How effective have they been so far?
Very ineffective, totally ineffective. You know, this is the 11th day, and it's keep going on, and the Israelis saying this is going to be a very long war. So they've been preparing the international community and the population and the rest that, you know, they're going to continue doing what they're doing. So when you're talking, for example, let's see one more time, the UN and UN agencies, their responses were very limited, late, and effective. And those are in the ground, like WHO or you know, the Red Cross and other institutions. They can't do anything in Gaza because of the continued airstrikes and the Israelis' blockade of the strip of Gaza in a manner of a collective punishment to the Palestinians in Gaza. So, and if you look at the European Unions and the European leaders, in fact, you know, people are agreeing, and this is really ironic, that, okay, there's a war, we know there's a war, and Israel has the right to do whatever he has to do in eliminating Hamas. All what we need to do is to focus how we can minimize the humanitarian crisis that we know it's happening, and we're allowing it to happen.
Yes.
So it is very ironic how the world is responding to this particular cycle of violence in the region. I'm not sure if you've been, I'm certain you've been watching and following up on details of the numbers of the children, numbers of women, numbers of forced people to migration to flee and leave their homes, the lack of all kind of livable issues. Gaza looks like, a place belongs to 2,000 years before humanity.
Yes.
The way the destruction has been made and reduced. So to answer your question directly, the international response was first pro-Israel and second ineffective to protect the Palestinians.
So, Valeria, Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan, who visited Lebanon on Tuesday, put forth a proposal for a guarantor system in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. How do you think this would play out, and what makes Türkiye a strong potential guarantor?
Well, let me say that the visit to Lebanon came after many other diplomatic contacts, more or less with all the Arab country representatives, also from with the Russian representative, the Western representative as well. And then last Sunday, Hakan Fidan went personally to Egypt to speak about the issue. Now, the new idea is to have a multilateral agreement, creating a sort of guarantors for the situation where Turkey will lead as a guarantor of Palestine. And together we are trying, with the other countries, we are trying to broker this agreement or this deal, or at least this attempt. I will say that this is the outcome of the new regional approach of Ankara, that instead has aiming at negotiating and also normalizing with the historical partners in the region by minimizing the margin of frictions or conflictuality in the region as well. Mm-hmm. And also Ankara, I think, is trying to build up by capitalizing as well on the mediation effort that has been put on the table regarding the crisis, the war between Russia and Ukraine. We shouldn't neglect that Turkey has been the main broker of the Green Deal, and it has been the main actor, the international and regional actor, that they tried to, they kept the channel of communication open between Russia and Ukraine, as well as they tried to, to negotiate it, to find a sustainable solution for the conflict. So according to this experience, which is quite a recent experience, I do believe that Ankara is trying to build up.
So, Shuai, an Israeli military spokesman said on Tuesday that the status of the Gaza Strip after Israel's planned ground offensive on the Palestinian enclave would be a global issue for discussions by Israel's politicians and with other countries. What was he hinting at?
Well, it's not surprising because since the first day the conflict started, we talked about that there would be a probability to have a domino effect in the region, but of course in the larger scale in the worldwide, because as we know that the Israeli and Palestinian conflict has its very complicated historical background as well, and generally through this in the 11th day we saw that kind of the heavy airstrike by the Israelis and the silence of the international community to this humanitarian crisis, it turned to a diplomatic and political crisis between the regional actors as well. So in the last 2 days, especially, we saw the Israeli also conducted airstrike to Syria and the Lebanon as well. And it's also flamed the possibility to basically the spillover effect of this conflict in those countries. And later, but it's a long term, and if you ask me, it's not easy and feasible as well. Mm-hmm. Maybe it led to a much more bigger sense of the conflict between the regional and also outsider of the region actors like the Russia and the United States. But of course, we hope that there won't be that kind of events or the spillover effect in soon.
So, Zaid, the same spokesperson, in response to a question about whether Israel's military planned to stay and govern Gaza after its ground operation, he said, we have all kinds of end games. So what could be those end games? Any ideas?
Well, yeah, I can guess and read and analyze what they mean by that. And there are three possibilities, three possible outcomes of this. Given the fact that, and this is not a fact yet, but what is the Israelis' goal is to eradicate, eliminate Gaza, Hamas, I mean, as an organization ruling in Gaza, and it is military and social infrastructure, and ousted Hamas out of Gaza. If that is the case, then Israel is left with three options to govern Gaza. One is to go back and occupy Gaza pre-2005 withdrawal. This is the biggest nightmare for Israel itself, but also it is an occupation again. So this will be not only a game changer, but there's going to be reason to tattle of new wars in the region. And I don't think the Israelis are considering this as being a top priority, but at least it's a possibility, an outcome, an option is on the table. Mm-hmm. Second one, of course, is to try to find a Palestinian partner in Gaza. So one of the Palestinians organization that are, according to Israelis' calculation and parameters, moderate, reliable, trustable, and can replace Gaza in terms of social support. I mean, Gazans social support for them, and also to delivering to governance in terms of security and services. I think it is very hard for Israel to find this Palestinian partner. The third one would be, of course, is to convince the PA, Palestinian Authority, to come and rule Gaza. True, it is, collective or some networks of leaders, including people who've been in Gaza and left Gaza for a while now. So these are the options. But regardless of the options, it is obvious that the Israelis' goal is not only agreed on, but also is supported by international community, that this is the end of Hamas. And we have to think of Gaza as Gaza after Hamas, how Gaza after Hamas will look like.
So before we go further, I'm going to play a clip of President of Egypt, Abdel Fatah El-Sisi, about his thoughts on what's happening in Gaza.
The current crisis is a drastic one, and I believe that the ongoing retaliation goes beyond the right to self-defense for Israel and amounts to the collective punishment of the Gaza Strip, home to 2.3 million Palestinians.
So, Valeria, is Egypt hardening its tone, and could this escalate further?
Well, I think anyway the situation is not sustainable and it may escalate further. I'm not sure whether Egypt is also keen to accept within its own border an eventual the possibility of having a flow of refugees or people escaping in case they open the gate from Palestine to Egypt. And it is also a matter of security for the whole region and for the whole of Egypt. That, by the way, we need to remember that some of the territories of Egypt are still under occupation by the Israelis. Therefore, there is this huge risk, I would say, of further radicalization as well, and of escalating the tones of the conflict in the region too. That's why a solid mediation is much needed in the region, because anything happening nowadays in Gaza Strips and between Palestine and Israel is not sustainable. Actually, what the Turkish president Recep Erdogan said, that the only doable solution is just the creation of two states, two separate entities, and this is the only, in my opinion, sustainable solution for the region in order to settle a certain order in the region, also related to the Palestine and Israel case.
So meanwhile, U.S. President Joe Biden also gave a warning to Israel about its future actions in Gaza. He was asked what he thought about Israel reoccupying the enclave. Let's have a listen.
I think that it would be a mistake for Israel to occupy Gaza again. But to going in and taking out the extremists, the Hezbollah is up north, but Hamas down south is a necessary requirement.
So, Shuai, is this enough of a warning to constrain Israel and to tell not to reoccupy Gaza?
Well, Ayşe, since the beginning of the conflict, we can say that the possible policies and also rhetoric of the United States will be the determinant of decision of Israeli government on the land operation. So after this, the Biden changing this rhetoric in last 2 days seems to be more feasible or moderate way. We will see how it affects the Israelis' motives and the moves later relating with the possible land operation. But if you ask me, especially in the last night, Secretary Blinken meeting with the war cabinet in Israel, it seems that at least for a while, for a few days, the land operation idea would be postponed. And I think they also waiting for the diplomacy between the regional actors that conducted by Blinken will be also important factor to decide there will be a land operation. If there will be a land operation, how it will be brought is a still question mark.
Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, many Gulf states have also released statements regarding Israel's attack on Gaza. For example, Saudi Arabia's Foreign Minister Prince Faisal bin Farhan said, "It's a disturbing situation. It's a very difficult situation. And you know, the primary sufferer of this situation are civilians. Civilian populations on both sides are being affected. And it's important, I think, that we all condemn the targeting of civilians in any form, at any time, by anyone." And Qatar's Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani said, "Human beings are human beings everywhere, whether they're in Israel or Palestinians. They have the same value. And this is deeply painful for all of us. And we would like to see the international law applied here, and also the same standards that we apply to any war being applied in that." So, Zaid, both statements seemed a bit toned down. How are the Gulf states reacting to the situation in Gaza?
Well, it is the reaction. It is the way, measured. It is measured in a way. It's trying to be balanced. It's trying not to put more into the conflict itself. But they're trying also not being very careful not to antagonize their domestic politics and domestic constituents and base. But let me tell you this. In the region, Jordan and Egypt are the direct and immediate neighbors to the situation in Israel.
Sure.
And any escalation in the war and in the violence being regional or forcing people to leave, whether from Gaza to Egypt or from the West Bank to Jordan, been a nightmare and existential threat for too long for the two countries. So you can tell from the reactions, this is a imminent security threat to both Jordan and Israel. Mm-hmm. Now, for the Gulf countries, it is also well constituted as it develops and the logic of the spillover itself will become a security threat to the Gulf countries as well. That's why they're trying to play whatever at their hands in order to put pressure on both sides to come closer to a kind of negotiated settlements to the situation. But you can see also the balance and the measure statements that we condemn the killing of the civilians regardless who's killing whom. And that goes both ways as well. That's the measure that I'm talking about. But in terms of, supporting or trying to prevent a humanitarian crisis, I think the Gulf are not only doing good, but are they doing the most when it comes of providing Palestinians with whatever aid possible.
So meanwhile, Valeria, Iran's foreign minister has also been very busy lately, having been in Beirut and Doha over the last week. Foreign Minister Amir Abdullahian reportedly warned Israel not to escalate the conflict and said it would intervene if Israel did so. Is this an empty threat, or would Tehran follow through?
Well, I think there is a margin of truth behind this. I mean, there are also evidence that behind Hamas, there was the Iran intervention as well as regarding Hezbollah in Lebanon. So as I mentioned before, the balance nowadays in the region is very sensitive and fragile. And also, I think Iran will benefit a lot in disrupting the so-called agreement between the Saudis and Israel. Saying, in other words, I mean, Saudi Arabia and Israel, they were in the brink of normalization. along the Abraham deals, Abraham Accords that were signed in the past as well. So in this kind of chaotic and hectic situation, Iran can have some benefit as well. And we shouldn't neglect that Iran has a different interpretation of regional order as well as international. Therefore, it's important as well to keep the dialogue open with Iran and the other important regional stakeholders in order to find at least a solution or mitigate the effect of the huge humanitarian disaster.
Yes. All right, Valeria, Shuai, and Zaid, unfortunately, we'll have to leave it here. Thank you very much for joining me on Straight Talk. Thank you for watching this edition of Straight Talk. Be sure to share your thoughts with us on X at Straight Talk TRT. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. From me, Ayşe Süberker, and the team, take care and goodbye.